Avia sat at gate C12, holding her ticket tight. Her phone lit up with a message from the building manager. Got your resignation letter. Are you sure you want to quit today? She couldn't even bring herself to answer. Just an hour ago, she'd left a handwritten letter on her boss's desk. A letter telling him she'd never been in a serious relationship before. That she'd been waiting for someone special who made her feel safe. That if he cared for her too, she was offering him her heart, her first real love, as her Christmas gift. Then she'd packed her things and left, hoping to disappear. He won't see it until tomorrow, she told herself. By then I'll be far away. But she was mistaken. At that very moment, in his beautiful penthouse overlooking Chicago, Sian-woo Dako was reading her letter. And he wasn't a man who let important things slip away. Hello dear viewers. I'm going to pause for just a moment. I spend many hours creating these stories for you, and I'm so pleased you've stayed with me this far. If you're enjoying Avia and Sian-woo's story, please do click the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'd also love to know where you're watching from. Just leave a comment below and join our little community of story lovers. Now, let's continue. To understand how Avia came to write such a heartfelt letter, we need to go back almost a year earlier, when she first stepped into Sian-woo's world. Avia woke up at 5:45 on a cold February morning. Her alarm clock buzzed beside her bed in her small South Side apartment. The old radiator made clanking noises against the wall. Outside, the Chicago winter was still dark. She made herself a cup of instant coffee and checked her phone. There was a message from her mother down in Atlanta. Thinking of you today, sweetheart. God bless your new job. Avia smiled and sent back a heart. Then she counted out $300 from her drawer, money for her mother's rent. Since her stepfather had left, Avia had been helping out every month. That's just how life was. You worked hard. You helped family. You carried on. She dressed in simple, practical clothes. Nothing fancy for a cleaning job. Her roommate Keisha appeared in the hallway, still in her pajamas. Another day cleaning for rich folks? Keisha asked with a yawn. New place today, Avia replied. A penthouse on Michigan Avenue. Fancy. Is the owner handsome? Avia shook her head. I haven't even met him. The building manager hired me. All these beautiful homes you clean, and you haven't been on a single date all year, Keisha said, shaking her head. Avia simply smiled. The bills don't pay themselves. There's more to life than paying bills, honey. Avia just grabbed her coat and headed out the door. The train ride from her neighborhood to the Magnificent Mile took almost an hour. Avia watched through the window as the city changed around her. First came the familiar streets, the small grocery stores, the churches, the brick apartment buildings where people knew each other's names. Then, gradually, the buildings grew taller. The streets got cleaner. The people wore expensive coats instead of warm layers. By the time she stepped off the train, it felt like she'd traveled to another country. Michigan Avenue stretched before her with its grand stores and tall glass buildings. Even in February, decorative lights twinkled in the trees. Avia felt out of place here. But she had a job waiting, and she'd always been good at her work. The building was more elegant than she'd expected. A friendly doorman greeted her. The security guard checked her papers, gave her a special card for the elevator, and directed her upstairs. 50th floor, he said. Mr. Dako's residence. The elevator was lined with mirrors and soft lighting. When the doors finally opened, Avia had to catch her breath. The penthouse was beautiful. Windows from floor to ceiling showed the whole city below. The floors were polished marble. Lovely paintings hung on the walls. The furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine. But the place felt lonely. Everything was perfect, yes, but there were no family photos. No books left open. No signs that someone truly lived here with their heart. It reminded Avia of a museum. Beautiful but untouched. She began her cleaning routine carefully. Dusting the shelves. Polishing the tables. Making sure everything stayed in its proper place. While cleaning the desk near the window, she noticed a framed photograph. It showed a handsome Asian man in a dark suit, shaking hands with several other men. They stood in front of a restaurant sign that read, Harbor and Hickory, that expensive place by the river she'd passed but never entered. The man had a strong face. Serious eyes. Perfect posture. But one of the other men in the photo looked familiar. Avia had seen his face on the evening news. Something about business activities that weren't entirely legal. She placed the frame back exactly where she'd found it. Not my business, she reminded herself. I'm just here to clean. In an office building nearby, Sean-woo Dako sat watching the security cameras from his penthouse. He should have been reviewing contracts. Taking phone calls. Preparing for his evening meeting. Instead, he found himself watching the new housekeeper move through his home. There was something different about how she worked. Careful. Respectful. As if the space mattered to her. She didn't rush. She placed his crystal glass on a coaster even though no one was there to see. And she hummed softly while she worked, an old song that reminded him of something warm and genuine. Sean-woo watched her longer than he should have. He'd had many housekeepers over the years. They came, they cleaned, they left. He barely noticed them. But this one. He finally made himself turn off the screen. Don't get distracted, he told himself. It never ends well. That evening, back in her apartment, Avia lay on her bed thinking about her day. Keisha popped her head through the doorway. So? How was the fancy house? Beautiful, Avia said. But strange. Like nobody really lives there, you know? Did you meet the owner? No. Just saw his things. Nice things? Avia thought about the elegant suits in the closet. The expensive watch on the nightstand. The serious man in the photograph. Yes, she answered quietly. Very nice. Maybe you'll meet him someday, Keisha said with a smile. Maybe he's wonderful. Avia just smiled. Good night, Keisha. But after her roommate left, Avia kept thinking about the penthouse. The stillness of it. The man who owned such a beautiful place but seemed to leave no trace of himself there. I wonder what kind of person he really is. The months passed by. Avia continued cleaning the penthouse twice a week. She sent money home to her mother. She paid her rent on time. Occasionally, she would see Sean-woo. Never for long. Just brief moments. He would come in as she was finishing. Always in a perfectly tailored suit. Always standing straight and tall. He would nod politely. Thank you, Ms. Langston. Those few words were all he ever said. But over time, Avia noticed things about him. He always paid her early, without being asked. When her mother was hospitalized in Atlanta, he sent a lovely bouquet with a simple note. Family comes first. Please take whatever time you need. He was always respectful. Never made her uncomfortable. Never stood too close or spoke too familiarly. And slowly, without quite meaning to, Avia began looking forward to the days she worked in his home. Not for the paycheck. But for those brief moments when she might see him. Christmas approached, and Michigan Avenue was transformed with lights and decorations. At night, Avia would lie awake, thinking thoughts she knew were foolish. What if I told him how I feel? She would shake her head at her own silliness. He's my employer. He's from a different world entirely. He would never. But the thought wouldn't leave her alone. It stayed with her through the days and nights. And 2 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, she would find herself placing a carefully written letter on his desk, the most honest words she had ever put on paper. Then she would hurry away, afraid to face what might come next. Sean-woo stepped into his quiet penthouse on Christmas Eve. Snow dusted the shoulders of his dark coat as he shook off the cold. He was on the phone, speaking Korean about a building he wanted to buy, when something caught his eye. There on his glass desk sat a small box wrapped in silver paper with a red ribbon. Beside it lay a handwritten letter. He stopped mid-sentence. "I'll call you back," he said simply, and hung up without another word. The penthouse felt unusually still. Even the city lights beyond his windows seemed to hold their breath. Sian-woo hung up his coat and walked slowly to the desk. He recognized the handwriting right away. Avia. His housekeeper. He opened the letter first, carefully unfolding the pages. As he read, his expression changed. Not quite a smile. Sian-woo rarely smiled, but something softened around his eyes. Avia had written that she respected him, not just as her employer, but as a person. She said she'd watched him all these months and seen kindness in the way he treated her. She admitted something very personal, that she had never been with anyone before. She had made a promise to herself years ago to wait for someone who made her feel completely safe. And then came the part that made his heart beat faster. She confessed that working in his home, being near his things, catching those brief moments with him, it had made her feel things she never expected to feel. She wrote that if he felt anything for her too, she wanted her first real relationship to be with him. She wanted to give herself, heart, body, and soul, to someone who truly saw her. And if he didn't feel the same way, she would quietly disappear. No awkwardness. No expectations. He would never have to see her again. Sian-woo read the letter twice. In his world, women had offered him many things. Some wanted his money. Others wanted his connections. A few simply wanted the thrill of being with someone powerful. But this was different. This wasn't about what he had. This was about who Avia thought he could be. And for a man who was used to people fearing or using him, this kind of honest trust was something entirely new. Sian-woo walked to the window, letter still in hand, and gazed out at the snowy Chicago evening. His mind drifted back to where it all began. He had grown up in Busan, South Korea. Came to Chicago when he was 32. On paper, he was just a successful businessman. He owned hotels. Restaurants like Harbor and Hickory. Office buildings along the Magnificent Mile. But there was another side to his success. He was what some might call a fixer. When certain people back in Korea needed things handled in America, things that didn't appear in official contracts, they called Sian-woo. Over the years, he'd built his legitimate businesses on top of these connections. Old favors. Old debts. Old loyalties that never quite went away. For the past few years, he'd been trying to change that. Clean up his reputation. Cut the old ties. Live more in the light. But men in his position didn't just walk away from that world. The shadows had a way of pulling you back. And someone like Avia. She doesn't belong anywhere near my complications, he thought. She deserves better than a man with my history. And yet, as he refolded her letter, he couldn't deny the warmth spreading through his chest. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a business partner, but an email from the building manager. Mr. Dako, your housekeeper Avia Langston has submitted her resignation, effective immediately. Would you like us to assign someone new after the holidays? Sian-woo stared at the screen. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then something shifted in his expression, a crack in his usual calm. He called downstairs to the security desk. When did Ms. Langston leave the building? He asked, his voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. About an hour ago, sir. She turned in her keycard and security badge. Did she say where she was going? She mentioned catching a flight, sir. Home for the holidays, I believe. A flight. She was running away. Sian-woo didn't hesitate. He called one of his most trusted people, a man who handled special arrangements for his businesses. I need to know which flight Avia Langston is on, he said. Check both O'Hare and Midway. The voice on the other end sounded surprised. Sir, it's Christmas Eve. The systems are crowded in. I don't care what day it is, Xianwu said quietly. Find her. He didn't need to raise his voice. The man knew that soft tone actually meant the matter was extremely important. Xianwu had friends in many places. People who owed him favors. People who knew better than to ask why he needed information. 20 minutes later, his phone rang. She's at O'Hare, sir. Gate C12. Flight to Atlanta boarding in about 40 minutes. Atlanta. Where her family lived. She was going home. Before leaving, Xianwu finally opened the small box Avia had left. Inside was a silver key pendant on a delicate chain. Simple but beautiful. Tucked beneath it was a small note in her handwriting. A key to the first real piece of my heart, if you want it. Xianwu held the pendant in his palm, feeling its weight. In all his years of expensive gifts and business deals, no one had ever offered him something so meaningful. Something so pure. He closed his fingers around the key. Xianwu grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. For the first time in years, he didn't have a carefully thought-out plan. He didn't know exactly what he would say when he found her. He just knew one thing. If Avia thought she could hand him her heart in a letter, offer him something as precious as her first love, and then simply disappear. Well, she didn't understand the kind of man Xianwu Dako really was. He wasn't someone who let go of things that mattered. And somehow, in 11 months of quiet mornings and brief conversations, this housekeeper from the south side had become the thing that mattered most. The boarding announcement crackled through the airport speakers. Flight 714 to Atlanta is now boarding Zone 1 passengers. Avia stood up, grabbed her carry-on bag, and joined the short line forming at the gate. Her hands felt cold despite the warmth of the terminal. Her heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her throat. Almost there, she thought. Just a few more minutes and I'll be gone. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, who smiled and began to scan it. Avia. That voice. Calm. Deep. Unmistakable. She froze in place, the boarding pass still extended in midair. No. It's not possible. He can't be here. But when she turned around, there he was. Xianwu Dako stood just a few feet away, looking completely out of place among the holiday travelers in their casual clothes and winter boots. He wore a perfectly tailored dark coat. His posture was impeccable. His eyes, those serious, knowing eyes, were fixed directly on her. The gate agent looked between them, confused. Ma'am? Your boarding pass? Avia couldn't move. I'm sorry, she mumbled to the agent, stepping out of line. I need a minute. Xianwu stood perfectly still as Avia approached him. Around them, families with children, couples heading home for Christmas, and tired business travelers rushed past. But he might as well have been alone in an empty room for all the attention he paid them. His focus was entirely on her. Avia's face felt hot with embarrassment. Mr. Dako, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you? How did you find me? I read your letter. His voice was quiet but carried an intensity that made her heart skip. Her stomach dropped. The reality of it hit her all at once. He had read every word she'd written. Every feeling she'd confessed. Every intimate truth. It was stupid, she stammered. It was too much. I shouldn't have written any of it. I wasn't thinking clearly. It wasn't stupid. His expression remained calm, but something in his eyes softened. It was honest. Avia glanced back at the boarding gate. They were calling the next group now. She could still make her flight. She could still run. As if reading her thoughts, Xianwu said, Please. Just talk with me for a moment. He led her to a quieter area near the windows, away from the bustle of the main terminal. Not by taking her arm or touching her in any way, just with a small gesture of his hand that somehow made it impossible to refuse. Avia followed, still in a state of disbelief. How had he found her? How had he known which flight she was taking? They stood near a row of empty seats. Outside the huge windows, snow was falling on the runway, the flakes illuminated by the airport lights. "Why did you quit without telling me?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry. Just genuinely puzzled. "Because." She struggled to find the right words. "Because I crossed a line. I'm your employee. You're my boss. What I wrote was completely inappropriate, Anne." "That's not why you're running," he interrupted gently. She looked up, meeting his eyes reluctantly. "You're running because you meant every word in that letter," he said. "And that scared you more than anything." Avia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She couldn't deny it. "How did you even find me?" she asked instead, changing the subject. "I have connections at the airport." "Of course you do," she said quietly. A moment of tense silence passed between them. "I've seen things, Mr. Daco," Avia finally said, her voice low. "The photos on your desk. The men you meet with. I've heard some of those names on the news." She stopped, afraid she'd said too much. Xian Wu didn't seem surprised by her observation. "You're not wrong to be cautious about my reputation," he acknowledged. "So it's true? You're involved in things?" She couldn't bring herself to say the words outright. He was quiet for a long moment, considering his response. "I've done business with people most landlords never meet," he finally said. "I've made decisions I'm not proud of. There are parts of my history that would make you want to run even faster than you already are." Avia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling cold despite the heated terminal. "But," he continued, his voice softening, "I've also been trying to leave that world behind. Slowly. Quietly. For years now." "Why?" she asked. Something changed in his expression, a brief glimpse of vulnerability that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. "Someone like you is part of the reason I keep trying." Avia didn't ask him to explain. She wasn't sure she was ready for the answer. Over the loudspeaker, a voice announced the final boarding call for her flight. "That's my plane," she said, glancing back toward the gate. "I know." Xian Wu's eyes never left her face. "I'm not telling you to stay, Avia. I'm asking for one night." She stared at him, confused. "One night?" "One dinner," he clarified. "Not at my penthouse. Not somewhere private. A public place, Harbor and Hickory. You keep your phone. You keep your wallet. You can leave anytime you want." Avia looked at him skeptically. "And after dinner? If you still want to leave Chicago, I won't stop you." He paused. "But I hope you'll at least hear me out before you decide to disappear." Every logical part of her brain was screaming no. This man was her employer. He was clearly involved in things she didn't fully understand. He was from a completely different world. But when she looked at his face, controlled as always, but with something almost hopeful in his eyes, she heard herself say, "Just dinner. That's it." The boarding gate closed behind them with a final announcement for Flight 714. They walked through the terminal side by side. Xian Wu didn't try to touch her or guide her. He simply matched his pace to hers, giving her space even as they moved in the same direction. Avia felt strangely calm now that the decision had been made. The plane would leave without her. She would stay in Chicago, at least for tonight. "I need to call my mom," she said suddenly. "She's expecting me." "Of course," he replied. "Take your time." She stepped aside to make the call, watching as Xian Wu maintained a respectful distance. Her mother answered on the third ring. "Baby, where are you? Did you board yet?" "No, Mama," Avia said, keeping her voice steady. "There's been a change of plans. I'm not coming tonight." "What? Why not? It's Christmas Eve. I know. I'm sorry. Something important came up. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Does this have something to do with that job of yours? Avia glanced over at Xianwu, who was looking out the window at the falling snow. Yes, she admitted. But I'm fine. I'll explain everything later. After promising to call on Christmas Day, Avia ended the call and rejoined Xianwu. Everything okay? He asked. She's disappointed. But she understands. That wasn't entirely true. Her mother didn't understand at all. How could she? Avia barely understood herself. As they passed a row of seats near the windows, Avia noticed a man in a gray hoodie quickly lowering his phone. He pretended to scroll through something, but she could have sworn the camera had been pointed in their direction just a moment before. Xianwu didn't seem to notice. Or if he did, he gave no indication. My car is waiting outside, he said as they approached the exit. Unless you prefer we take a taxi. Your car is fine, she replied. The automatic doors opened, and the cold Chicago air hit them. Snow was falling steadily now, coating the sidewalk with a fresh layer of white. Avia shivered, pulling her coat tighter. Here, Xianwu said, unwrapping the scarf from his own neck and offering it to her. I'm okay, she said automatically. Please. It's very cold. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted the scarf. It was soft cashmere, and it still held the warmth from his body. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. After you, Xianwu said. Avia paused at the edge of a decision. She could still change her mind. She could still walk away, find a hotel, figure things out tomorrow. But as the snow fell around them and the city lights glittered in the distance, she found herself sliding into the back seat of Xianwu's car. He joined her, keeping a respectful distance on the leather seat. Harbor and Hickory, he told the driver. As the car pulled away from the curb, Avia looked back at the airport. Neither of them noticed the man in the gray hoodie watching from just inside the terminal doors. He held his phone to his ear, speaking quietly. Yes, it's definitely him. Xianwu Dako. He just left with some woman. Black woman. Young. Pretty. I've never seen her before. He listened for a moment. No, he didn't see me. Want me to follow them? Another pause. Understood. I'll send you the photos now. He lowered the phone and began tapping on the screen, sending images of Xianwu and Avia walking through the terminal, talking by the window, and getting into the black car. In a city like Chicago, nothing stayed secret for long. And there were certain people who made it their business to know exactly who Xianwu Dako cared about, and exactly how to use that information against him. As the car merged onto the highway, Avia stared out at the snow-covered city. Second thoughts? Xianwu asked quietly. She turned to look at him. In the dim light of the car, his features seemed softer somehow. Less intimidating. About 100 of them, she admitted. To her surprise, he smiled. It was a small smile, just a slight upward curve of his lips, but it transformed his face. That's fair, he said. I'm having a few myself. You are? He nodded. I don't usually chase women through airports. I don't usually write confession letters to my boss, she countered. For a moment, they looked at each other. Then, unexpectedly, they both laughed. It wasn't much, just a brief moment of shared absurdity. But it eased the tension between them. As the car continued toward downtown Chicago, the snow falling gently outside the windows, Avia felt something shift inside her. Not quite trust. Not quite comfort. But something close to hope. She didn't know what would happen at dinner. She didn't know if she'd be on another plane tomorrow or if she'd stay in Chicago. She only knew that for the first time in a very long time, she was following her heart instead of her head. And somehow, despite everything, it felt right. Harbor and Hickory was everything Avia had imagined it would be. The restaurant was warm and elegant. Wood and glass everywhere. Soft lighting from candles flickered on each table, and through the tall windows, she could see snow falling gently over the Chicago River. The moment they walked through the door, Avia felt out of place. Everyone here looked like they belonged in fancy magazines. Men in expensive suits. Women in beautiful dresses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. People laughing softly over wine glasses that sparkled in the candlelight. And here she was, in the same simple dress she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 2 years ago. The one she'd found on the clearance rack at Macy's. But then something unexpected happened. The host, a tall man in a perfectly pressed suit, looked up and immediately smiled. "Mr. Dacco," he said warmly. "We weren't expecting you this evening. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, James," Xianwu replied. "Table for 2, please." "Something quiet." "Of course. Right this way." As James led them through the restaurant, Avia noticed how people glanced up as they passed. Not staring, exactly. More like they were aware of Xianwu's presence. Like they knew who he was. They were seated at a private booth in the corner. It had a perfect view of both the river and the dining room, yet felt removed from the bustle of the other tables. As they sat down, Avia realized something. He'd chosen this place on purpose. Not to show off how fancy it was. Not to make her feel small. But to bring her somewhere he was respected. Somewhere he felt comfortable. Somewhere he could be seen with her. Avia picked up the menu and nearly gasped at the prices. She quickly tried to hide her reaction, but when she glanced up, she caught Xianwu watching her. "What?" she asked, feeling self-conscious. "Nothing," he said. Then after a pause, "You look nice. Thank you for coming." She didn't know how to respond to that. No one had ever thanked her just for showing up before. So she looked back down at the menu, pretending to study it carefully. A waiter appeared at their table, smiling broadly. "Mr. Dacco, wonderful to see you tonight. We have several Christmas Eve specials I think you'll enjoy." The man proceeded to describe elaborate dishes that weren't even on the menu. He spoke to Xianwu with a mixture of respect and familiarity that made Avia realize something important. This wasn't just a place Xianwu visited. This was a place he owned. Or at least invested in. Who is this man really? She wondered, watching him nod as the waiter spoke. "And what am I doing here with him? Would you like me to order for both of us?" Xianwu asked her when the waiter finished. "Or would you prefer to choose your own meal?" "You can order," Avia said. She didn't recognize half the dishes the waiter had described anyway. Xianwu nodded and selected several items. The waiter smiled, collected their menus, and disappeared. For a moment, they sat in silence. Around them, the restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of silverware. "You have questions," Xianwu said finally. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Avia nodded. "A few. Ask anything. Tonight, no secrets." The appetizers arrived, beautiful little plates of food that looked more like art than dinner. Avia took a small bite and was surprised by the burst of flavor. "Tell me about yourself," Xianwu said as they ate. "Not just what was in the letter. Tell me about your life." Avia hesitated, then slowly began to share. She told him about growing up on the south side of Chicago. About her mother moving to Atlanta after the divorce. About working since she was 16 to help with bills. She told him about watching her mother struggle through bad relationships. About her aunt who gave everything to a man who left when things got hard. "I decided pretty early on," she explained, "that I wouldn't just give myself away. Not my body. Not my heart. Not until I found someone who made me feel completely safe. Someone who actually saw me for who I am." Xianwu listened without interrupting. He didn't check his phone or look around the restaurant. He simply focused on her words, making her feel like everything she said mattered to him. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Nobody has ever told me no, the way you have," he finally said. "Not in a way that made me respect them more." Avia looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "Most people in my life want something from me. Money. Connections. Power. They say yes to everything I offer because they want what I can give them." He took a sip of his water. "You turned down my world. You were willing to leave rather than compromise what matters to you." The main course arrived, a perfectly cooked fish for Avia and something with beef for Xianwu. The waiter poured wine in Xianwu's glass but seemed to notice Avia's hesitation and silently brought her a sparkling water instead. "Now it's your turn," Avia said after they'd eaten for a while. "Tell me about you. The real you." Xianwu placed his fork down carefully. "I grew up in Busan, South Korea," he began. "My family wasn't wealthy or connected. I made my own way." He explained how he came to Chicago in his early 30s. Not as a tourist or student, but with a purpose. "I was sent by certain people back home," he said carefully. "People who needed someone they trusted to handle business interests in America." "What kind of business?" Avia asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Some legitimate. Some, less so." His face remained calm, but his eyes showed a hint of something darker. "I started with instructions and expectations. I built connections. Made arrangements that don't appear in normal contracts." "You mean illegal things," Avia said quietly. "Yes," he admitted. "Though over time, I began building my own legitimate businesses. Hotels. Restaurants like this one. Properties along the Magnificent Mile." "So you're..." She struggled to find the right words. "What some might call a fixer," he supplied. "A contact person between certain interests in Korea and opportunities in Chicago." Avia took a sip of her water, processing this confirmation of what she'd suspected. "There was a moment," Xianwu continued, "about 3 years ago, when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore. I didn't like what I had become." "What did you do?" "I started trying to change. Building clean businesses. Cutting old ties when possible. It's been slow. Difficult. But I'm trying." His honesty surprised her. He wasn't making excuses or pretending to be something he wasn't. He was simply telling her the truth, even the parts that didn't make him look good. "There was one night," he said suddenly, "one moment that really changed how I thought about you." Avia waited for him to continue, curious. But Xianwu just shook his head. "Another time. Not tonight." After dessert, a shared plate of something chocolate that melted in Avia's mouth, she finally asked the question that had been on her mind all evening. "What do you actually want from me, Xianwu?" He set down his coffee cup and looked directly at her. "I want time," he said simply. "I want to know who we are together without lies between us. And if I decide I can't handle your world, the things you've been involved with, then I let you go." His voice was gentle but firm. "I won't pressure you into anything, Avia. If you ever choose to be with me, really be with me, it has to be your choice. Not because you feel trapped or obligated." He leaned forward slightly. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not. But I'm also not the same man I was 5 years ago. Or even 1 year ago." For the first time since she'd heard his voice at the airport, Avia felt her shoulders relax. She was still nervous. Still uncertain about what all this meant. But somehow, she felt less afraid. "Would you like to walk for a bit?" Xianwu asked as they finished their coffee. "The riverwalk is beautiful with the Christmas lights." Avia nodded. "I'd like that." He paid the bill without looking at it, just handed over a card that the waiter accepted with a small bow. Outside, the snow was falling in large, soft flakes. The air was cold but not bitter. Christmas lights twinkled along the river, reflecting off the dark water in shimmering patterns of red, green, and gold. They walked side by side along the river walk. Xianwu positioned himself on the street side without making a show of it, a small, old-fashioned gesture of protection that Avia found unexpectedly touching. They didn't hold hands. Didn't touch at all. But somehow, they seemed to fall into step naturally, as if they'd walked together many times before. "Thank you for dinner," Avia said as they paused to watch a boat decorated with Christmas lights passing slowly on the river. "Thank you for not getting on that plane," he replied. For a little while, it almost felt normal. Peaceful. Just a man and a woman walking through the snowy city on Christmas Eve. Not a Korean businessman with shadowy connections and a black housekeeper from the south side who'd offered him her heart in a letter. Just two people finding something unexpected in each other. But 3 miles away, in a dimly lit bar in Koreatown, a very different scene was unfolding. A man in a gray hoodie, the same man from the airport, was showing his phone to 3 well-dressed Korean men seated in a private booth. On the screen was a slightly blurry video. Xianwu and Avia walking through the airport terminal. Getting into his car. Another photo of them entering Harbor and Hickory. "He canceled a meeting with us because of her," one of the men said in Korean. "Who is she?" "Just some woman who works in his building," the man with the phone replied. "A housekeeper or something." The oldest man at the table studied the images, his expression thoughtful. "Xianwu Dako doesn't change his plans for housekeepers," he said quietly. "This woman matters to him." He took a sip of his drink, still looking at the photo of Xianwu and Avia. "And that makes her very interesting to us." The men nodded in agreement, a silent understanding passing between them. For years, they had been waiting for Xianwu Dako to show a weakness. Something they could use to bring him back in line. To remind him of obligations he seemed increasingly eager to forget. And now, it seemed, they had found exactly what they needed. Avia pressed her back against a storefront window, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She'd just left one of Xianwu's buildings after dropping off some paperwork for him. It was supposed to be a quick errand, just deliver the folder to his office manager and head home. But as she stepped outside onto Michigan Avenue, she saw something that made her freeze. Across the street, in front of the entrance to one of Xianwu's hotels, 2 groups of men were arguing. Not the kind of polite disagreement you might see between businessmen. This was something else entirely. Voices raised. Hands gesturing sharply. Then one man shoved another. Before Avia could process what was happening, a sharp crack split the air. The large window beside the hotel entrance splintered, though it didn't completely shatter. Avia ducked instinctively, pressing herself against the nearby storefront. In the distance, police sirens began to wail. The men scattered quickly, disappearing into cars or down side streets. As they dispersed, Avia heard one of them shout something that made her blood run cold. Xianwu's name. This wasn't some random argument. This was about him. If you've made it to the end of this story, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button before you close this video. Why? Because thousands of people who thought they'd subscribe later never did, and missed the story I posted yesterday that's even more shocking than this one. Don't be that person who misses out. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. Now, let's continue. To understand how Avia ended up in this frightening situation, we need to go back to what happened after that Christmas Eve dinner at Harbor and Hickory. The 3 weeks following Christmas had been the strangest, most wonderful time of Avia's life. After that night, she didn't go back to cleaning Xianwu's penthouse. But she didn't leave Chicago either. She came back to him. Not as his housekeeper. Not officially as his girlfriend either. Something in between. Something they were still figuring out together. Xianwu had arranged for her to stay in one of his properties, a small but beautiful apartment in a building he owned not far from his penthouse. He insisted it wasn't a gift, just a practical arrangement until they decided what came next. "You're not my employee anymore," he'd explained. "But I hope you'll stay in Chicago a while longer. So she did. She called her mother on Christmas Day, trying to explain without really explaining why she hadn't come home for the holidays. "There's someone I've met, Mama," was all she could manage to say. Her mother had been quiet for a moment. "Then, someone special?" "Maybe," Avia had answered honestly. "I'm still figuring that out." As January unfolded, she and Xianwu began spending time together. Not every day. He still had his businesses to run, meetings to attend, calls to make. But regular enough that Avia found herself looking forward to each moment with him. Small things. Coffee in the mornings in his penthouse. She'd laugh at how he always took it black, no sugar or cream. "You drink it like medicine," she teased him once. "Isn't that what coffee is?" he'd replied with that small, rare smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. He began rescheduling his meetings so that she never had to travel home late at night. He'd arrange for his car to pick her up if it was past 7 in the evening. One night, he gave her a spare key to his penthouse. "For emergencies," he said simply, dropping it into her palm. "What kind of emergencies are you expecting?" she'd asked. He just shrugged. "I like knowing you can reach me if you need to." It was these small gestures, these quiet ways of showing he cared, that were slowly winning her over. On a quiet evening in mid-January, they were sitting in his penthouse. Snow was falling softly outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights twinkled below them like earthbound stars. Xianwu was working on his laptop while Avia read a book on the couch nearby. The comfortable silence between them felt like a warm blanket. "Say this," he said suddenly, looking up from his computer. He spoke a phrase in Korean. Avia looked at him, surprised. "What does it mean?" "Try it first," he encouraged. She repeated the sounds awkwardly, feeling her tongue trip over the unfamiliar words. To her delight, he laughed, a real laugh, something she'd rarely heard from him. "That was terrible," he said, but his eyes were warm. "Well, what did I just say? Or try to say?" "The view is beautiful tonight," he translated. Avia looked out at the snow and city lights. "It is beautiful." He taught her a few more simple phrases that evening. She mangled most of them, but he was patient, correcting her gently. A few days later, she surprised him by cooking dinner in his rarely used kitchen. Nothing fancy, just a simple chicken dish her mother used to make. She wasn't even sure he'd like it. But Xianwu ate every bite, then asked for the recipe. "For your chef?" she asked, half joking. "For me," he replied simply. "I'd like to learn how to make it myself." The idea of this powerful, serious man carefully following her mother's chicken recipe made Avia smile for days afterward. They'd stand by his windows sometimes, looking out at the city together. Not talking. Just being. Sometimes their shoulders would touch, lightly. Neither would move away. She still hadn't asked him about the night that changed how he saw her, that mysterious comment he'd made at Harbor and Hickory. And he still hadn't told her. Some questions, Avia had decided, could wait. But not everything in those 3 weeks was peaceful. One afternoon in the second week of January, Avia was waiting for Xianwu in the lobby of one of his office buildings. He had a meeting that was running late, and they were supposed to have lunch afterward. As she sat in the sleek, modern waiting area, she noticed a group of men being escorted into the elevator by Xianwu's assistant. They didn't look like the usual businessmen who visited. Something about them felt different. Harder. More dangerous. When Xianwu finally came down an hour later, his face was carefully blank, but Avia had learned to read the tiny signs of tension around his eyes. "Is everything okay?" she asked as they walked to a nearby cafe. "Just business," he said dismissively. "Nothing for you to worry about." But she did worry. Then came the day that confirmed her concerns. Avia had stopped by one of Xianwu's buildings to drop off some documents he'd accidentally left at his penthouse that morning. As she was walking past a conference room with the door slightly ajar, she overheard voices. One of them was Xianwu's. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but something in the tone of the conversation made her pause. "You've changed, Xianwu," a man was saying in accented English. "You're distracted. Too focused on these legitimate ventures." "My businesses are performing well," Xianwu replied, his voice calm but cold. "There's nothing for anyone to be concerned about." "There's talk back home," another voice added. "People wondering if you've gone soft. If Chicago has made you forget who you are." "I know exactly who I am," Xianwu said evenly. One of the men laughed, not a pleasant sound. "Is it because of the woman? The one you were seen with at Christmas?" Avia felt her heart skip. They were talking about her. "My personal life is not open for discussion," Xianwu said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet she'd only heard once or twice before. "Everything is open for discussion when it affects business," the first man countered. "If you can't hold your territory here, someone else will. And they won't be as polite about it as we're being." Avia didn't stay to hear more. She quickly left the folder with the receptionist and hurried out of the building, her mind racing. She knew Xianwu had connections to people who operated in the shadows. He'd been honest about that. But hearing it so directly, realizing that those people were watching him, watching them, made it suddenly, frighteningly real. And now, 3 weeks after Christmas, Avia found herself pressed against a storefront on Michigan Avenue, watching the aftermath of what could only be described as a warning. As the last of the arguing men disappeared and the police sirens grew closer, Avia started to move. She needed to get away from there. She needed to call Xianwu. But before she could take more than a few steps, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb in front of her. The back door opened, and there was Xianwu, his face more serious than she'd ever seen it. "Get in," he said simply. Avia didn't hesitate. She slid into the back seat, and he followed, closing the door behind him. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately, his eyes scanning her face, her arms, looking for any sign of injury. "No," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm fine. I was just dropping off those papers and then I saw." "I know," he interrupted gently. "One of my security people called me." The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, merging into traffic just as a police car came around the corner, heading toward the hotel. "Xianwu, what's happening?" Avia asked. "Those men were arguing about you. I heard your name." He was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the passing buildings. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "This wasn't random," he said. "There are people who don't like the direction I'm taking my life." "Because of the clean businesses?" she asked, remembering the conversation she'd overheard. "Because of you." She stared at him, not fully understanding. "They think I've gone soft," he explained. "That I'm distracted. That you're my weakness." He said the last word carefully, as if he'd never considered it before. "And they're testing to see if they're right. By breaking windows at your hotel?" "That's just the beginning," he said quietly. "A message." Avia looked down at her hands, which were still trembling slightly. "I never meant to bring trouble into your life," Xianwu said, and something in his voice made her look up. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw something in his eyes that looked like fear. Not for himself, she realized. For her. "I think I can keep you out of this," he continued. "But if it gets worse, I might have to send you somewhere safe for a while." Avia felt her chest tighten at his words. "I just decided to stay in Chicago," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "And now you want me gone again?" "Not gone," he corrected gently. "Safe. Away from you. If necessary, yes." She shook her head. "That's not your decision to make, Xianwu." He looked at her, surprised by her firmness. "I'm not some china doll you need to put on a high shelf," she continued. "I made a choice to stay. To see what this is between us. I'm not running away just because things get complicated." The car continued through the city streets as they sat in silence. Avia could almost see the conflict playing out behind Xianwu's carefully controlled expression. For a man who was used to controlling everything in his world, caring about someone this much was like losing control completely. She could see that now. She could see how terrifying it was for him. "Let's go back to your penthouse," she said finally. "We need to talk about this. Really talk." After a moment, Xianwu nodded and leaned forward to give the driver instructions. As they drove through the snowy city streets, Avia looked out at the familiar buildings of Chicago. 3 weeks ago, she'd been ready to leave all this behind. Now, she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Even if staying meant facing whatever danger came with being part of Xianwu Dako's life. Back at the penthouse, Xianwu poured himself a small glass of whiskey. He offered one to Avia, but she shook her head. "Tell me everything," she said as they sat in his living room, the city spread out below them. "Who are these people? What do they want from you?" Xianwu took a small sip of his drink, gathering his thoughts. "When I first came to Chicago, I was sent by certain people from back home," he began. "Powerful people with interests here in America. I was their representative. Their enforcer, in some ways. And now? Now I've been trying to distance myself. Build my own businesses. Legitimate ones. Become my own man. And they don't like that," Avia guessed. "They see it as disloyalty," he confirmed. "As weakness. Especially since I've been distracted lately." "By me," she said softly. He looked at her directly. "Yes." Avia took a deep breath. "So what happens now?" "Now I send you somewhere safe until I can resolve this," Xianwu said, his tone suggesting this was already decided. "No," Avia replied simply. "Avia, these aren't people you can reason with. If they decide you're the reason I'm pulling away, they might." "I'm not leaving," she interrupted. "That's not how this works, Xianwu." "Then how does it work?" he asked, a hint of frustration breaking through his usual calm. "We face it together," she said. "You don't get to just ship me off somewhere because it's convenient." "It's not about convenience," he said, setting down his glass. "It's about keeping you safe." "And what about you? Who keeps you safe?" The question seemed to surprise him. He had no immediate answer. Avia moved to sit beside him on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You told me at Harbor and Hickory that if I ever chose to be with you, really be with you, it had to be my choice," she reminded him. "Not because I felt trapped or obligated." He nodded slowly. "Well, this is me choosing," she said. Eyes wide open. "I'm not running away just because things get hard." Xianwu looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You don't know what you're choosing," he said finally. "These people." "Then help me understand," she said. "Don't push me away. Help me understand your world so I can be part of it." The sun was beginning to set outside, casting long shadows across the penthouse. The city lights were coming on, one by one, like stars appearing in the evening sky. Xianwu stood and walked to the window, his back to Avia. "There's something I haven't told you," he said after a long silence. "About when I first noticed you. Really noticed you." Avia remembered his comment from Harbor and Hickory. "You said there was a night that changed how you saw me." He nodded, still looking out at the city. "It was about 6 months ago," he began. "I was having a difficult week. Some business deals had gone wrong. People were making demands I didn't want to meet." He turned to face her. "I came home late. Past midnight. You were still here, cleaning. You shouldn't have been, your shift ended at 8. Avia remembered that night. The penthouse was a mess, she recalled. "You'd had some kind of meeting here. There were glasses everywhere. Papers scattered around." "I'd had some business associates over," Xianwu confirmed. "It hadn't gone well. I was angry. They were angry. Things got heated. I remember thinking it didn't seem like you, Avia said. Your place was always so organized. I told you to go home, Xianwu continued. That you could come back in the morning. But I didn't, Avia said softly. No. You said, and I'll never forget this, you said, everyone deserves to come home to a clean, peaceful space. Especially after a bad day. Avia smiled slightly. That's what my mama always said. You stayed another hour, Xianwu said. You cleaned everything. Put it all back in order. And when you left, you didn't ask questions. You didn't look scared or judgmental. You just said, good night, Mr. Dako. Tomorrow will be better. He came back to the couch and sat beside her again. That's when I knew you were different, he said quietly. You saw the chaos. You must have had questions. But you just helped. Simply. Without asking for anything in return. Avia felt a warmth spreading through her chest at his words. That's why I can't let you get hurt because of me, Xianwu continued. You represent something good. Something I didn't think existed in my world. She reached out and took his hand, the first time she'd ever initiated physical contact between them. Then let me help you now, she said. Not by running away. But by standing beside you while you figure this out. Xianwu looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. I can't promise it will be easy, he said. Or safe. I know, she replied. But I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the windows. In the quiet of the penthouse, something shifted between them, a decision made, a path chosen. For better or worse, they would face whatever came next together. Avia woke up slowly, the sunlight warming her face. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Then she opened her eyes and sat up quickly, her heart racing. This wasn't her apartment. This wasn't the penthouse either. She was in a bedroom she'd never seen before, modern, minimalist, with large windows overlooking a part of Chicago she didn't immediately recognize. The bed was comfortable, the sheets expensive. But nothing was familiar. She was still wearing her clothes from yesterday, though someone had removed her shoes. Avia swung her legs over the side of the bed, trying to stay calm. As she stood up, she noticed Xianwu standing by the window in the adjoining living room, his back to her, looking out at the city. Where am I? She asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Xianwu turned around. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much. Somewhere safe, he answered simply. Avia walked into the living room, taking in her surroundings. The place was beautiful, hardwood floors, tasteful furniture, large windows. But it felt less personal than the penthouse. More like a high-end hotel suite than a home. You moved me while I was asleep, she asked. Xianwu nodded. After we talked last night, you fell asleep on the couch. I didn't want to wake you. So you just brought me here? Without asking? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. This is one of my properties. Not many people know about it. No one would think to look for you here. You could have asked me first, Avia said, crossing her arms. I know. He didn't turn to face her, just kept looking out at the view. I panicked. After what happened on Michigan Avenue, seeing you there when those men were. He trailed off. Avia softened slightly. You were worried. Yes. That doesn't give you the right to move me around like I'm furniture, Xianwu. I know, he admitted. I should have asked. I'm not. I'm not used to considering other people's feelings in my decisions. That, at least, was honest. Is there coffee? Avia asked, deciding to set aside the issue for the moment. In the kitchen, Xianwu replied. Everything's stocked. I made sure of it. Of course he did. Xianwu Dako didn't do anything halfway. After a cup of coffee and some toast, Avia felt more human. She sat on the couch in the living room, tucking her feet under her. Xianwu sat in an armchair across from her, his posture perfect as always. I think it's time you told me everything, Avia said quietly. No more pieces. The whole truth. Xian Wu was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I grew up in Busan, he began. My family wasn't rich, but we weren't poor either. My father worked for a shipping company. My mother was a teacher. Very normal. He spoke carefully, choosing each word. When I was in university, my father lost his job. The economy was bad. We struggled. I took odd jobs, anything to help pay the bills. Avia listened without interrupting, watching his face. There was a man who owned several businesses in our neighborhood. He noticed me, said I was hardworking, respectful. He offered me a job. Better money than I'd ever made before. What kind of job? Avia asked when he paused. At first, just running errands. Delivering messages. Then collecting payments from his business partners. Xian Wu's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. I knew it wasn't entirely legal. But I told myself it was just temporary. Just until things got better at home. He stood up and walked back to the window. It wasn't temporary. I was good at it. I could be persuasive without being threatening. People liked dealing with me more than with some of his other employees. I moved up quickly. In a syndicate, Avia said softly. Not a question. Yes. Xian Wu didn't deny it. By the time I was 30, I had my own territory in Busan. When the opportunity came to expand to America, they sent me. Chicago was perfect, a big Korean population, good business opportunities. I was supposed to establish connections, set up legitimate fronts, and create channels for their interests. And you did. Very successfully, he agreed. For years, I was exactly what they wanted me to be. I built the restaurants, the hotels, the properties. But I also built the other side, the part that doesn't show up in official records. Avia took a sip of her coffee, processing this. The men yesterday, they work for these people? Some of them, Xian Wu confirmed. Others work for rivals. They're all watching me now, trying to figure out if I'm becoming a problem. Because you're trying to go straight? He turned to face her. Because I'm putting my own interests ahead of theirs. Because I'm prioritizing what I want over what they expect. And what do you want? Avia asked. His eyes met hers directly. A different life. One I can live in the open. She understood what he wasn't saying, a life that could include her. The people who sent you here, they won't just let you walk away, will they? No, he said simply. They won't. Avia set down her coffee cup and stood up, needing to move. She walked over to stand near him by the window. You think I don't understand risk, she said, looking out at the city. I risked everything when I wrote you that letter. My job, my dignity, my whole heart. I know, he said quietly. So don't treat me like someone who needs to be hidden away. If I'm going to be with you, I need to be with you, not locked in a tower for safekeeping. Xian Wu looked at her for a long moment. You're braver than I gave you credit for, he finally said. I always have been, she replied, a touch of pride in her voice. I had to be. He nodded slowly. Tell me about that. About your life before we met. Avia was surprised by the question, but she answered honestly. My daddy left when I was 8. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mama had to work 2 jobs to keep us going. When she got sick a few years ago, I had to drop out of college to help pay the bills. She turned away from the window, leaning against the wall. I learned early that nobody's going to rescue you. You have to stand on your own feet. Is that why you've never? Xian Wu trailed off, clearly referring to what she'd written in her letter. Why I've never been with anyone? Avia finished for him. Partly. I saw too many women giving themselves to men who didn't value them. My aunt nearly destroyed herself loving a man who treated her like she was disposable. I promised myself I'd never do that. So you've been waiting. For the right person. For someone who would see me, really see me. Not just what I could give them. Xian-Wu was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. I respect that, he finally said. More than you know. As evening approached, they ordered food from a nearby restaurant. Xian-Wu's driver picked it up and brought it to the condo without coming inside. They ate at the small dining table, talking about simpler things for a while. The weather. A book Avia had been reading. A new property Xian-Wu was considering. It felt almost normal. Almost like they were just a regular couple having dinner together. After they finished eating, they moved back to the living room. Xian-Wu turned on a lamp as the daylight faded, casting a warm glow over the room. There's something I need to make clear, he said, sitting down on the couch. Avia sat beside him, leaving a small space between them. I'm listening. What you wrote in that letter, about waiting, about giving yourself to someone for the first time, I won't rush that, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Whatever happens between us, it has to be because you're completely certain. Why? She asked, genuinely curious. Because it matters to you, he said simply. And you matter to me. The sincerity in his voice made something warm bloom in Avia's chest. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights come on as darkness fell. Without really planning to, Avia found herself leaning sideways until her head rested gently on Xian-Wu's shoulder. He didn't move away. Didn't put his arm around her or try to hold her hand. He just stayed perfectly still, letting her decide how close she wanted to be. It was the most respectful thing anyone had ever done for her. Later that night, after they'd talked more about his businesses, about her hopes for the future, about small things that made them both smile, Xian-Wu finally outlined his plan. I've been preparing for this for over a year, he explained. Slowly separating my legitimate businesses from the other interests. Creating distance. Building walls between the parts of my life. And now? Avia asked. Now I accelerate the process. Cut ties completely with the old network. Focus only on the clean properties, the legitimate businesses. Will they let you? Some will accept it. Others will resist. His voice was matter-of-fact. There will be negotiations. Possibly more incidents like yesterday. Avia considered this. And what do you need from me? Patience, he said. Understanding that this won't be simple or quick. And... He hesitated, trust that I'm doing this the right way. You mean the legal way? As legal as possible, given the circumstances. That wasn't entirely reassuring, but Avia appreciated his honesty. Is it really possible to just walk away from people like that? She asked. Xian-Wu turned to face her fully. The city lights behind him cast his profile in shadow, but she could still see his eyes, serious and intent. Not cleanly, he admitted. Not quickly. But if it means building something real with you? He reached out, gently touching her face with his fingertips, the first time he'd initiated such contact. I'm willing to find out. The quiet determination in his voice made Avia believe him. This wasn't just talk. This wasn't an empty promise. Xian-Wu Dako was a man who, once he made a decision, followed through completely. He meant every word. He just didn't know yet what that choice would cost. The next morning, Avia stood in the bathroom of the safe condo, looking at herself in the mirror. She'd slept well, despite everything. Xian-Wu had insisted she take the bedroom while he stayed on the couch. Always the gentleman, she'd teased him. Not always, he'd replied, with that small, rare smile. But I'm trying to be. Now, as she washed her face and tried to make herself presentable in yesterday's clothes, Avia thought about everything he'd told her. The syndicate connections. The dual businesses. The danger that came with trying to leave that world behind. Most sensible people would run in the opposite direction. Find a nice, normal man with a nice, normal job. No complications. No risk. But Avia had never been interested in the easy path. And there was something about Xian-Wu, his quiet strength, his absolute honesty with her, the way he looked at her like she mattered, that made her want to see this through. When she came out of the bathroom, Xian-Wu was on the phone, speaking rapidly in Korean. His back was to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Whatever the conversation was about, it wasn't pleasant. He ended the call when he noticed her standing there. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Business," he said simply. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Avia knew better now. She'd seen behind the curtain. "If we're doing this together," she said, "then I need to know when things aren't okay. No more protecting me from the truth." Xian-Wu looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "That was my contact in Busan," he said. "They're sending someone to evaluate the situation here in Chicago." "That's not good, is it?" "No. It means they don't trust my judgment anymore." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "They think I'm compromised." "Because of me," Avia said softly. "Because of the choices I'm making," Xian-Wu corrected. "You're just a convenient explanation for them." "What happens when they send this person?" "They'll watch. They'll test. They'll look for weaknesses." His eyes met hers. "They'll try to figure out how to bring me back in line. And if they can't?" Xian-Wu didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet but certain. "Then I'll have to make it very clear that I'm not their man anymore." The way he said it sent a chill down Avia's spine. Not because he sounded threatening or violent, but because he sounded absolutely resolved, like a man who had made a decision he knew might cost him everything. "When will they arrive?" she asked. The message said 3 days. 3 days. Not much time to prepare. "What do we do until then?" Avia asked. Xian-Wu crossed the room to stand in front of her. Slowly, giving her plenty of time to step away if she wanted to, he took her hands in his. "We live," he said simply. "We don't hide. We don't run. We show them that my decision is made." "That sounds dangerous," Avia observed. "It is," he admitted. "But hiding would be more dangerous. It would show weakness." She nodded, understanding the logic even if it made her nervous. "So we just go about our business? Like normal?" "With some precautions," Xian-Wu clarified. "You'll have security with you when I'm not there. My most trusted people. And when you are there?" His hands tightened slightly around hers. "Then you have me." It shouldn't have been reassuring. One man, no matter how capable, against what sounded like a powerful organization. But somehow, standing there with Xian-Wu holding her hands, looking into his steady, determined eyes, Avia felt safer than she had in years. "Okay," she said. 3 days. Then we face whatever comes." "Together?" he asked, and for the first time, she heard a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Avia nodded. "Together." Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, sending shafts of light through the windows of the safe condo. It felt like a promise. Or maybe a warning. Either way, they would face it side by side. The Korean restaurant was busy with the lunch crowd, but the back room was quiet when Xian-Wu walked in. 3 men sat at a table, waiting. They didn't stand when he entered. They didn't smile or bow or offer any greeting at all. The oldest man, gray at his temples, expensive watch on his wrist, simply gestured to the empty chair across from him. Xian-Wu unbuttoned his coat but didn't remove it. He sat down, his back straight, his expression calm. This wasn't a friendly lunch among colleagues. This was business of the most serious kind. The men had arrived from Busan 2 days earlier, representatives sent to evaluate the situation in Chicago. Xian-Wu had been expecting them. Planning for this moment. A server appeared with tea, then disappeared quickly, closing the door behind him. Even the waitstaff knew not to linger. "You look well, Xian-Wu," the oldest man said in Korean. "America agrees with you." "Thank you, Mr. Park," Xian-Wu replied in the same language. "Chicago has been good to me." "So we've heard." Mr. Park's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your businesses are thriving. Your reputation is strong. You've built quite a life here." "I have." "Then why," the second man asked, leaning forward, "have we been hearing such troubling things?" Xian-Wu took a sip of his tea, unhurried. Perhaps you should tell me what you've heard, Mr. Kong. That you're distracted, Mr. Kong said bluntly. That you're turning away from opportunities. That you've forgotten who you work for. There it was, the accusation laid bare. Cian Wu set down his cup carefully. I haven't forgotten anything, he said, his voice steady. But after 10 years in Chicago, I've made some decisions about my future. What kind of decisions? Asked the third man, the youngest of the group. His tone was curious rather than confrontational. Cian Wu looked each man in the eyes before speaking. When he did, his words were simple and direct. I'm stepping back from all non-legitimate activity. I'm willing to sell my stake in certain operations, take my money, and walk away. For a moment, there was complete silence in the room. Then Mr. Park laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. Just like that? After all these years? Yes. The three men exchanged glances. Mr. Kang's face darkened. You think it's that easy? He asked, voice rising slightly. You walk away and we just forget everything you know? Everything you've done? I'm not walking away from what I know, Cian Wu corrected calmly. I'm walking away from what I do. There's a difference. Mr. Park studied him for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. You're serious about this, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes, Cian Wu replied. I am. The atmosphere in the room shifted. What had been merely tense now felt dangerous. The three men from Busan didn't make threats or raise their voices, men in their position rarely needed to, but Cian Wu could feel their displeasure like a physical weight. Let me understand, Mr. Park said, setting down his cup. After all we've invested in you. After all the trust we've placed in your hands. You want to simply retire? Not retire, Cian Wu corrected. Redirect. Focus on my legitimate businesses. Build something that can last in the open. Because of the woman? Mr. Kong asked sharply. Cian Wu didn't flinch. You've been having me watched. Of course we have, Mr. Park said, waving a hand dismissively. You're valuable to us. When we heard you were behaving unusually, we became concerned. The housekeeper, Mr. Kong continued. The one you chased to the airport at Christmas. The one you've been seen with all over the city. Is she worth throwing away everything you've built? Cian Wu remained perfectly still. He had expected this, the attempt to make it about Avia, to reduce his decision to a simple infatuation. My personal life is not relevant to this discussion, he said evenly. Everything is relevant, Mr. Kong countered. Cian Wu didn't argue further. Instead, he reached into his coat and removed a slim folder, which he placed on the table. What is this? The youngest man asked, reaching for it. Information, Cian Wu replied. Financial records. Property deeds. Corporate structures. He watched as they flipped through the papers, their expressions changing from confusion to surprise to something close to respect. You've been planning this for some time, Mr. Park observed. Yes. What the papers showed, and what Cian Wu had spent years arranging, was a careful separation of his businesses. The legitimate hotels, restaurants, and properties were now held in corporations completely distinct from any questionable activities. There were no financial connections, no paper trails, nothing that could be used against him. More importantly, he had secured his position with legitimate banks, investors, and city officials. He had become, in every measurable way, untouchable. Impressive, Mr. Park admitted. But unnecessary. We've never threatened your clean businesses. Consider it insurance, Cian Wu replied. I've also taken the liberty of arranging suitable replacements for my other responsibilities. Mr. Young in Lakeview would be an excellent choice to oversee the import interests. Mr. Choi could handle the financial arrangements. The three men looked at each other again, a silent conversation passing between them. You really want out that badly? Mr. Kong asked, his voice quieter now. For a woman? Cian Wu looked him directly in the eye. For a life, he corrected. The one I choose, not the one chosen for me. Something in his tone, the absolute certainty of it, seemed to finally convince them he was serious. While Sian-woo was facing his past in the back room of the Korean restaurant, Avia was taking a step toward her future. She sat in the elegant lobby of Harbor and Hickory, trying not to fidget with the hem of her dress. She dressed carefully for this interview, a simple navy blue dress that was the nicest thing she owned, her hair neatly styled, minimal makeup that highlighted her natural beauty. When Sian-woo had suggested she apply for a position at the restaurant, she'd been hesitant at first. "Won't people think I only got it because of us?" she'd asked. "The manager will hire you based on your abilities," Sian-woo had assured her. "James is very particular about his staff. If anything, your connection to me might make him more demanding." So here she was, waiting to be interviewed for a front-of-house position, someone who would greet guests, help coordinate events, ensure that every detail was perfect. "Ms. Langston?" A tall man in a perfectly pressed suit approached. "I'm James Harrington, the general manager. Thank you for coming in today." Avia stood, offering her hand. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Harrington. Please, follow me to my office." As they walked through the restaurant, Avia took in the elegant space with new eyes. Not as a guest now, but as someone who might become part of its daily life. The polished wood, the crystal glasses, the soft lighting, all of it designed to create an atmosphere of refined comfort. In his small but meticulously organized office, James gestured for her to sit. "So," he began, "I understand you've worked primarily in household services until now." "Yes," Avia confirmed. "Most recently as a housekeeper in a luxury residence on the Magnificent Mile." "And what makes you interested in transitioning to restaurant work?" Avia had prepared for this question. "I enjoy creating beautiful, comfortable spaces for people. In a home, that means ensuring everything is clean and orderly. In a restaurant like Harbor and Hickory, it means making sure guests feel welcome and valued from the moment they arrive." She continued, her confidence growing as she spoke. "I've always been good at reading people, knowing when someone needs attention and when they prefer privacy. I notice details. I remember preferences. I think those skills would translate well to hospitality." James nodded, making notes. "Mr. Dako speaks very highly of your work ethic and attention to detail." "I appreciate that," Avia said carefully, "but I want to earn this position on my own merits." James looked up, something like approval in his expression. "That's refreshing to hear. Many people in your position would simply expect to be given the job." "That's not who I am," Avia said simply. The interview continued for another half hour. James asked about her experience handling difficult situations, her comfort level with technology, her availability for evening and weekend shifts. Avia answered honestly, neither overplaying nor underplaying her abilities. By the time they wrapped up, she felt cautiously optimistic. Whether she got the job or not, she represented herself well. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Langston," James said as he walked her back to the lobby. "We'll be making our decision by the end of the week." "Thank you for the opportunity," Avia replied with a warm smile. As she stepped outside into the winter sunshine, she felt a sense of possibility opening before her. From housekeeper to restaurant hostess might not seem like a huge leap to some, but for Avia, it represented something important, a step toward a future she was choosing for herself. She checked her phone. No messages from Sian-woo yet. His meeting was probably still ongoing. She hoped it was going well. She hoped he was safe. Back in the private room of the Korean restaurant, the negotiations had reached a critical point. "These are our conditions," Mr. Park said, pushing a handwritten list across the table. "If you want out, these are the terms." Sian-woo read the list carefully. Most of it was what he'd expected. He would not interfere with how they ran their operations in Chicago going forward. He would maintain certain banking arrangements for another 12 months to ensure smooth transition. He would remain a friendly face for introductions on the legitimate side if they needed access to certain circles. "These are acceptable," Sian-woo said, looking up. With one addition of my own. And what would that be? Mr. Kong asked, his tone wary. I want clean, legal separation. Documented releases from all obligations. Contracts that prove I'm out. The three men from Busan exchanged glances again. That's unusual, Mr. Park said carefully. But not impossible, Xian Wu countered. You have lawyers. I have lawyers. We can make this official. Why the insistence on paperwork? The youngest man asked. Our word has always been enough before. Times change, Xian Wu said simply. People change. I want to be certain there are no misunderstandings in the future. What he didn't say, what he didn't need to say, was that he wanted protection. Insurance against any future attempts to pull him back in. Documentation that would make it very difficult for them to claim he still had obligations to fulfill. Mr. Park studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. We can arrange the paperwork. But understand this, Xian Wu, once you're out, you're out. If you ever need our help again. I won't, Xian Wu said with quiet certainty. There was a moment of silence, heavy with the weight of years of history between them. Then Mr. Park extended his hand across the table. It's been an honor working with you, he said formally. You've served us well. Xian Wu shook his hand, then Mr. Kang's, then the youngest man's. Thank you for understanding my decision, he replied, equally formal. As he stood to leave, Mr. Park added one last comment. I hope she's worth it. Xian Wu paused at the door, then turned back. She is, he said simply. But this isn't just about her. It's about who I want to be. He left without looking back, stepping out of the dim back room into the bustling main restaurant. He felt lighter somehow, despite knowing that paper agreements with men like these were only as good as their willingness to honor them. But it was a start. A clean break. A line drawn. That evening, Avia was in her apartment when her phone rang. Xian Wu's name appeared on the screen. How did it go? She asked immediately. Better than expected, he replied, his deep voice reassuring in her ear. They agreed to my terms. There will be paperwork, transitions to manage, but it's done. Avia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Really? Just like that? Not just like that, he corrected gently. This has been years in the making. But yes, the hard part is over. I'm glad, she said softly. Then, remembering her own news, oh. I had my interview at Harbor and Hickory today. How was it? Good, I think. James seemed impressed. He said they'll decide by the end of the week. He'd be a fool not to hire you, Xian Wu said, and Avia could hear the smile in his voice, a rare thing. We'll see, she said, not wanting to get her hopes up too high. How are you feeling? After everything today? There was a brief silence on the line. Free, he finally said. For the first time in a very long time. The simple honesty of that word made Avia's heart ache a little. She tried to imagine what it must feel like to walk away from a life that had defined you for so long. When will I see you? She asked. Tomorrow, he replied. There's something I want to show you. Another property, she guessed, thinking of his many buildings around Chicago. No, he said, his voice warming. Something better. After they said their goodbyes, Avia sat looking out her window at the night sky, thinking about Xian Wu's words. Something better than a property? Coming from a man whose life had been defined by buildings and businesses, that was intriguing. She didn't know yet that he wasn't talking about a building or investment. He was talking about the life he was finally free to build. A life that, if she chose it, could include her not just as a temporary companion, but as a permanent part of his future. A future that, for the first time in years, he could see clearly. The early February evening was cold but clear as Xian Wu drove Avia through the streets of Chicago. They had just finished dinner at a small restaurant near the lake, nothing fancy, but the food was delicious and the atmosphere peaceful. Avia noticed they were heading toward a neighborhood she didn't know well. Not quite the magnificent Mile, but close enough to see the tall buildings in the distance. The streets here were quieter, lined with older buildings that had character and history. Xianwu pulled up in front of a small, elegant building. 4 stories tall, with warm brick and large windows. It wasn't flashy or imposing like his other properties. It had a certain charm to it, like a lovely old home that had been carefully maintained over the years. There were no lights on except for a single string of warm bulbs glowing in what looked like a lobby area. "What is this place?" Avia asked, looking out the car window. "Come inside," Xianwu replied, a hint of something different in his voice. "I'll show you." He unlocked the front door with a key from his pocket and held it open for her. Avia stepped into a space that immediately felt welcoming. The lobby was beautiful but not intimidating. Polished wood floors. Comfortable-looking furniture in rich, warm colors. Fresh flowers on a central table. Soft lighting that made everything glow. "This is a boutique hotel," Xianwu explained, watching her take it all in. "Part hotel, part long-stay suites for people who need a home away from home." He led her further inside, turning on lights as they went. Everything looked freshly renovated, modern, but with touches of the building's original character still intact. "It's lovely," Avia said, running her fingers along a beautifully restored wooden banister. "When did you buy it?" 3 months ago, Xianwu answered. "The renovation just finished last week." He guided her through the ground floor, showing her the small dining area, a cozy library with bookshelves, a garden courtyard that would be beautiful in spring. "This is fully mine," he said as they walked. "No partners. No old money. No strings." The way he emphasized those last words made Avia understand their significance. This building had nothing to do with his past. It was completely clean. Completely his. "What do you think of the colors?" he asked, gesturing to the warm cream and soft blue walls. "The furniture? The lighting?" Avia was surprised by his questions. "You're asking for my opinion?" "Yes," he said simply. "I value it." She looked around more carefully, seeing the space with new eyes. "I think it's perfect," she said honestly. "It feels peaceful. Not like a typical hotel where everything is fancy but cold. This feels like somewhere people would want to stay." Xianwu nodded, pleased by her answer. "That's exactly what I wanted. I've stayed in too many places that looked impressive but felt empty." He led her toward a small elevator at the back of the lobby. "I want this place to feel welcoming. Warm. Like someone actually cares about the people who stay here." Avia looked at him, really looked at him. "That doesn't sound like the man I met 11 months ago." A small smile touched his lips. "I know." The elevator took them to the roof, where Xianwu had created something special. A glass-enclosed garden room occupied part of the space, filled with comfortable seating and plants. The rest was an open terrace with heat lamps keeping the winter chill at bay. From here, they could see the Chicago skyline stretching before them. The city lights twinkled against the dark sky. A few buildings still had Christmas lights glowing, even though it was now February. "This is beautiful," Avia said, turning slowly to take in the 360-degree view. "I thought you might like it," Xianwu replied. There was something in his voice, a slight tension, maybe nervousness, that made Avia turn to look at him. Xianwu was never nervous. He stood near the edge of the terrace, the city lights behind him. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, holding it in his closed hand. "Do you remember what you gave me at Christmas?" he asked. Avia nodded. "The key pendant." He opened his hand to reveal it, the small silver key lying in his palm, catching the light from the nearby lamps. "You wrote that you were giving me the first key to your heart," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I didn't know what to do with that at first. I didn't think I deserved it." Avia felt her heart begin to beat faster. There was something happening here, something important. And now? She asked quietly. Now I know that a key isn't just about access, he said. It's about responsibility. Taking care of what matters. Protecting what's precious. He took a step closer to her. I've spent my life building things, Avia. Properties. Businesses. Power. But never a real home. Never a real life. Xian Wu reached into his pocket again. This time, he pulled out a small velvet box. Avia's breath caught. He didn't get down on one knee, that wouldn't have been like him. Instead, he stood before her, honest and direct as always. I'm out of the old world now, he said. I've cleaned up my name as much as I can. I'm building something real, these properties, this life. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Not flashy or overly large, but beautiful in its simplicity. A single diamond set in platinum, with small sapphires on either side. If you still mean what you wrote in that letter, he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, if you still want your first everything to be with me, not just physically, but in every part of life, then I'm asking you to be my wife. Avia felt tears gathering in her eyes. This moment seemed impossible just a few months ago. When she'd written that letter at Christmas, when she'd run to the airport, she never imagined standing here now. Xian Wu, she whispered, her voice catching. You don't have to answer now, he said quickly. I know this is. Yes, Avia interrupted. He paused, his usual composure slipping for just a moment. Yes? Yes, she repeated, more firmly this time. I'll marry you. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Xian Wu carefully took the ring from its box and slipped it onto her finger. A perfect fit. How did you know my size? Avia asked, looking down at the ring glittering on her hand. A small smile tugged at his lips. I notice details. It's what I do. Of course he did. Xian Wu Dako noticed everything. They stood together on the rooftop, the city spread out around them like a blanket of stars. Avia felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. She thought about the scared girl at O'Hare who wanted to run away from her own feelings. She thought about the woman at Harbor and Hickory who began to hope that something real might be possible. And now she was here, standing beside this complicated, honorable man who had just offered her a future she never imagined. Xian Wu gently drew her into his arms. It wasn't their first embrace, but it felt different somehow. More certain. More permanent. They held each other on that balcony, city lights twinkling below them. No passionate declarations. No dramatic gestures. Just two people who had found something unexpected in each other. Something worth building a life around. I never thought I'd have this, Xian Wu said quietly, his chin resting lightly on the top of her head. Someone who knows all of me, the good and the bad, and chooses to stay anyway. That goes both ways, Avia replied. I never thought I'd find someone who truly sees me. Not just what I can give or do, but who I really am. They stayed like that for a while longer, savoring the moment. The night wasn't overly cold, and the heat lamps kept the worst of the chill away. But eventually, Xian Wu suggested they go back inside. I want to show you the rest of the building, he said. If you're interested. Of course I am, Avia replied. It's beautiful. As they rode the elevator back down, Avia looked at the ring on her finger, still getting used to the weight and feel of it. It caught the light and sparkled, much like the city they'd just been looking at. Did you pick this out yourself? She asked. Yes, Xian Wu answered. I wanted something elegant but not flashy. Something that would suit you. It's perfect, she said. And it was. They spent the next hour walking through the boutique hotel. Xian Wu showed her the different room types, the small kitchen that would serve breakfast to guests, the courtyard that would bloom with flowers come spring. As they walked, they talked about the future. Not just the wedding, which they both agreed should be small and private, but beyond that. The life they wanted to build together. I got the job at Harbor and Hickory, Avia told him as they explored one of the suite rooms. James called this afternoon. I start next week. Congratulations, Xianwu said, genuine pleasure in his voice. You earned that on your own merits. I know, she said with a smile. He made that very clear. Said my connection to you might have gotten me the interview, but my skills got me the job. James is a good judge of character. They moved through to a beautiful corner suite with windows looking out in two directions. What about this place? Avia asked, gesturing around them. When will it open? 1 month, Xianwu replied. Just in time for the spring business travel season. You'll need a good staff, Avia observed. People who understand your vision for it. Yes. He looked at her thoughtfully. Perhaps, eventually, you might consider being involved here too. Not right away. I want you to enjoy your position at Harbor and Hickory. But someday, if you're interested. The idea of working alongside Xianwu, helping to create the warm, welcoming atmosphere he envisioned for this place, appealed to Avia more than she expected. I'd like that, she said. Someday. They ended up back in the lobby, standing in the soft light of the single string of bulbs that had been glowing when they arrived. I never thought I'd have this, Xianwu said, echoing his words from the rooftop. A partner. A real life. Avia smiled up at him. Neither did I. And it was true. The girl who had cleaned his penthouse for 11 months, who had written a desperate letter on Christmas Eve, who had tried to run away rather than face her own feelings, that girl never imagined she would be standing here now. But life had a way of surprising you. Sometimes in the best possible ways. Later that night, Xianwu drove Avia back to her apartment. They had decided she would keep her own place until the wedding, which they thought might be in early summer. A small ceremony, perhaps at the boutique hotel's rooftop garden once it was in full bloom. Will you tell your mother? Xianwu asked as they pulled up in front of her building. Yes, Avia said. I'll call her tomorrow. She'll want to meet you, you know. I'd like that, he replied. And Avia could tell he meant it. He walked her to her door, ever the gentleman. When they reached it, he took both her hands in his. Thank you, he said simply. For saying yes? Avia asked with a small smile. For seeing something in me worth saving, he corrected. For offering me your heart when I hadn't earned it yet. She leaned up and kissed him softly, a gentle kiss full of promise rather than passion. Good night, Xianwu, she whispered. Good night, Avia, he replied. That night, she gave him something she'd promised to save, not just her first love, but her complete trust. Her belief in his ability to change, to become the man he wanted to be rather than the man others had shaped him to be. And he gave her something he'd never given anyone either, a future with no secrets. No hidden parts of himself kept in shadow. No walls between them.